This video is going to be a quick overview of how to get everything set up so you can follow along in Code Louisville. Now, everything we're going to do here will be mentioned in class, but it moves kind of quick, so I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to go through this on their own and get it set up so they can just be ready to ask questions about it during class time. So, what do I mean by setting up your environment? Basically, that just means installing everything you need so that you can code along and work on a project. So the first thing to talk about is that as you've been going through Treehouse with the pre-work and the first week of videos, you have probably been using workspaces, which is Treehouse's little tool here that if you click launch, it pulls up something that looks like this. This is one way to write code, but it's not the way it's done in the, quote, real world. You don't use something like workspaces. So one of the things we're going to do is install a text editor. A text editor is exactly what it sounds like. It's a tool that lets you edit text, or code in this case. There are literally hundreds of text editors out there. Great many of them are free, and it is very much a personal choice type of decision. My personal preference is for one called Visual Studio Code, which you can get at code.visualstudio.com, or if you just Google search Visual Studio Code, it'll be the first result. A quick note, if you see something called Visual Studio Community, that is an entirely different tool. You want to be sure you get Visual Studio Code. If you're interested in exploring other ones, Atom, which is atom.io, is another good one. And Brackets is another one to look at. There's lots of other ones out there. Feel free to ask for recommendations from other people. But again, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, and it's very simple. All you need to do is download the installer, and I've already done that just so you don't have to watch me download files, but I've got that right here. I just saved it in a folder. And so when you download it, you'll get this exe file, and you just double-click it to run. And it may ask you to confirm, depending on how you have your computer set up, and you should just be able to click through all this. Accept the agreement, pick where you want to install it. You can change how it appears if you want. And here are a few options that you can add. I personally do like to have a desktop icon, so I'm going to go ahead and check that. And I plan to have all my code files open in Visual Studio Code, so I want to have these options. You can add them if you want. You don't have to, though. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of them, and then just confirm, and it's going to install. So while that's installing, I'm going to be talking about I guess what text editors are. Basically, they are just advanced ways to look at your text. So it's like Notepad or Word in a way, but these often have specific tools and formatting options for the purpose of writing code. They may highlight things, color code them, help you tab and indent things. They have things like autocomplete, all kinds of different tools to help make coding easier. And these types of tools are what real developers use. And we want you to get started with them right away and start getting used to them, because this is how it's actually done. And if you get a job in this world, this is what you'll need to be familiar with. So we're not going to actually get into writing any code during this video. This is just how to get everything set up. But basically, you should be able to launch it if you want. I'll go ahead and launch it real quick just so you can see. And that should pop up. And there we go. So yours may look a little bit different. I already have some projects that it's recognizing. So that's why you see kind of some of this stuff over here. But basically, all this is a text editor. And you can see a little bit of code here, or a configuration file. And you would be able to write your code in here. And we'll cover that a little bit later on in Code Louisville course. So the next thing that you want to get set up is a GitHub account. So GitHub is a website. It's just github.com. And it's free to use with a basic account. And you need to go ahead and create an account for yourself. I've already got one and I'm already logged in. But you should be able to just sign up. You just need an email address, and you'll create a username and a password for yourself. And then go ahead and log in and reserve that for yourself. So what is GitHub? GitHub is a website where you can store code and other things, but it's primarily used for storing code. And it has lots of tools to help you browse that code, share it, collaborate on it with other people, and basically just kind of make it easier to keep track of your files and make sure you don't lose anything. We at Code Louisville have our own GitHub page, so you can go to it by just going to github.com/Code Louisville, or you could search for it up here and find us under the users, but it's probably easiest just to go to github.com/Code Louisville. And you'll see this. And we've got lots of different tools and projects. Most of this won't make any sense, but there is one that I want to go ahead and draw attention to. It's called Front End Template. It may be this third one here. It may shuffle around a little bit because it sorts by most recent active. But if you go in there, you're going to see what's called a skeleton. It's basically just all the folder structure and files you need to start a project without any of the code actually in it. So we can see here I've got an index file, and if I click on it, it's got basically just the starter tags that every HTML file has that you've probably learned in your pre-work. You see the head and the body and the HTML tags, and you could start writing and creating a file in there. It's also got a README, which GitHub is smart enough to find and display down here. So when I put this README text in this folder, it goes ahead and displays it here. And this kind of gives you an idea of what you would want to show in a README file. So README is just information about your project. So in this case, I would put a description about whatever my project is here. I would name it. I can talk about the technical specifications here, like if I had some special CSS classes or JavaScript functions that I wanted to write some documentation about, those would go here. I've also got some folders created, so any CSS I create would go in the CSS folder. And we've got a CSS file here, but it's blank. Same with images. Any images you want to put would go in this folder, and JavaScript files would go here. And again, we've got a blank file. So this is just a skeleton of a project where you could take this and start working on something. Again, we won't be doing any code now, but I want to show you how to get this so you can start working with it. Right now we're just viewing it. We can't actually write the code here on GitHub. So what we want to do is we want to clone or download it. So later on you're going to learn about cloning and why that's better. But for right now we're just going to open it, or I'm sorry, we're going to download it. So I'm just going to click download there. And again, I got to that by clicking the green button. This popped up, and then I click download zip. And I want to save that somewhere. I'm just going to save it right here in this folder that I've already got. And it should just take literally a second. And when I go here, I see I've got a zip file. If you're not familiar with what zip files are, they're kind of like folders in a way. They're a way to store multiple files into a single file. And Windows should be smart enough, as long as you're on any system in the last few years, to recognize what a zip file is and open it for you. You may have heard of other programs called WinZip, 7-Zip, WinRAR. Those are all tools that can open these as well, but Windows should be smart enough to do it itself. And if you double click on it, it doesn't look like much changed, so double click on it here and it still says the same thing. But basically what that is that is the folder that contains all these files. And so if I click into that one, there they are. And so I've got these files on my computer, but I'm still not ready to work with them. So these files are still zipped up. They're still contained in this file, so I'm going to get them into a normal directory. And you can do that several different ways. You could open it up and either copy or drag it out of here, or you can right-click on it and you can extract it. So I want to extract everything from this, and it's going to ask me where. Just for ease of following along, I'm just going to extract it to where it suggests, but you can put this anywhere on your computer. And again, it should take a second, and it's probably going to open up the folder in a new window. But we can see here now that I've got a file folder. And inside that are all my files, and now I'm ready to work. I could start coding directly in this by opening these files up. So let's say I wanted to open my CSS. I could just double click on it, and because I haven't set up my defaults yet, it's going to ask me what. So in this case I want Visual Studio Code, and we'll see that Visual Studio Code will launch and show me that CSS file, which again is blank, but I could start writing my CSS here. So whoops, I didn't mean to close that. Let me reopen that folder. So once I've extracted that file, I can, if I want, delete the zip file just to get it off my computer, and now I've just got my folder that I can work with here. And depending on the options you selected, I probably should have changed mine, but it created a folder within a folder. If you don't like that, you can just kind of move things out, but I'm just going to leave it as is for right now. All right, so that's how I got a file, or a project actually, off of GitHub. All these were here. I downloaded them and opened that. Now I want to set up something called Git. Now, this site we've been on is called GitHub, and this thing we're going to talk about is called Git, but they are different things. Git and GitHub are not the same thing. GitHub is a website where you store files. Git is a tool that allows you to interact and store those files on GitHub and other places. So, we'll talk more about that in class, and there will be a tutorial on this. You'll go through Treehouse videos. Your mentors are going to talk about it in class. But just so you can get started and get everything ready, I'm going to show you how to install it. So here's the Git's website. This one is specific for Windows users. So if you are on Windows, or if you're on Mac or Linux, you likely already have Git. You just may not know it. So if you're on Windows, just go to git-scm.com, or you can just Google search Git, G-I-T, and it's likely the first result. And you should be able to download it here. In this case, I've already downloaded it, again, so you don't have to watch me. And I'm just going to install it like everything else. So just double click. And Windows is going to ask me if I'm sure. And again, I agree to everything. I'm just going to install in the defaults. There are some options here. Again, you can check these if you want or not. The one that I like my things on my desktop, so I'm going to check that one. But these other ones probably can leave as they are. So I'm going to click Next. And again, it asks me where it wants it in my menu. I'll just go with the defaults. So they've got different styles to this that you can pick. These are basically just visual things. I prefer the Vim default editor. It's what I'm familiar with. You're welcome to try other ones, but if you're not sure what to pick here, just go with the default choice. And then this is kind of how you access the Git commands. So this is, again, another personal preference thing. And if you're familiar with Windows prompt, you may or may not be, but if you ever open up your Windows thing and type CMD for command or type command prompt, you may have seen this before. This is the Windows command prompt, which allows you to do text commands for your computer. So you can look around in directories and things like that. In this particular case, I like to keep my Windows command separate from my Git activity. So I'm going to use Git's own thing. It's called the Git bash, sometimes called the Git bash shell. And basically, this is going to look like that command prompt I just showed you, except it's going to be Git's own version of it. And it's going to use something you may have heard of called Linux commands. And basically, this is just some very powerful text commands you can do to a computer that there just aren't great interfaces built for. So again, personal preference, but I recommend you pick the Git bash option. And again, this is something that you're not really going to mess with, so just take the default options here. And again, default options. And again, I'm going to stick with the defaults here. Lots of things that Git allows you to do because it's so powerful. But in general, just going with the defaults is probably fine. Same here. I'm not going to touch any of that. And finally, we're going to get install going. So what is this doing? This is installing the Git tools onto my computer. So that bash shell that I was just talking about is going to be something that I can run, and it's going to open a text screen. We'll see that here in a minute. And it allows me to run Git commands. And what do these Git commands do? Again, tutorials will cover this a lot more in detail. But basically, it's going to be commands that allow me to do things like download projects, save them, create multiple versions of them so I can go back and review what I did in the past, collaborate with other users, and basically just make sure my project stays intact and organized. And just a heads up, Git can be a little confusing sometimes just because it's different. It may be completely unlike anything you've used before, but it's not as complicated as it may initially seem. There's just a few commands that you need to You don't even have to memorize them. You can just create a little cheat sheet for yourself and keep them on hand. So my installation is done. I'm going to, actually I'm not going to launch it straight off, and I don't want to review the release notes, so I'll uncheck those and hit finish and Git is installed. So I'm going to switch to my desktop here, and you'll see that it's added my Git bash. So this little icon right here is going to open my Git bash shell, so I'll just double click that. And here we go. This is Git in all its glory. Whoops. So it doesn't look like much at first, but it's sitting here with a cursor, a little blinking cursor, saying it's waiting for me to do something. And this is where I could start doing some various Git commands. But all we're going to do for this video, just to prove that we've got it all set up, is we're going to type our first command to verify it's installed. And the best way to do that is check to see what version we got. So we type git, G-I-T, space, dash, dash, which is the key next to the right of 0 and to the left of the equal sign, and then version. And I hit the enter or return key, and it says I've got Git version 2.15.1.windows.2. Doesn't matter. It just means I got an updated version, and because it was able to run that command, that means I have Git installed. So that's pretty much it. Your environment is ready to go. You've got your text editor installed. You've got your GitHub account created. You have downloaded a sample project to start with, and you have set up Git, and you're able to run commands. Again, we'll get into the specifics of these commands through Treehouse and also talk about them in class, likely in week 2 of the Code Louisville meetups. And I hope you learned something from this, and please don't hesitate to ask questions in class and on Slack and anywhere else you need.